Good morning, class. So today, this is our third class on the book The Iliad by Homer. And in the previous two classes, we had done a detailed introduction about Greek epic, about the background for the Iliad, about introducing characters and some of the themes and talking about the theme of the Iliad. Then in the next class, for people who had not attended the classes, we had done a summary of book 1 to 16, right? Along with an analysis, we finished a summary of book 1 to 16. As we know that the Iliad comprises of 24 books. It is an epic poem which is of about 150,000 lines, and then you see that it is divided into several chapters or several books as they are called. So we are moving to the summary of book 17. In our class today, we plan to complete the 7 remaining books and then also to move on to uh, some of the important issues, themes, and questions that are important from your examination point of view, right? So we'll be looking at those today, and apart from that, we'll just be giving a sort of a recap to whatever we've done today until now. Now, you remember that in the last class, in book 16, we finished at the point where the battle was going on, and the battle is of course going on between the Greek and the Trojan warriors, and it is about this lady that they've captured called Helen, right? So we've discussed all of that, but since some of you may or may not have been in class, I'm just giving a sort of backdrop. And then the poem is about the death of, the wrath of Achilles. And in the book 16, we actually ended at a point where we were talking about the death of Achilles' friend Patroclus. Now, Patroclus has been killed with the intervention of gods by Hector, and Hector also shames Patroclus, and Patroclus then foretells of the death of Hector. Achilles is not on the scene right now, right? But we see that once Achilles gets to know about the death of his dear friend Patroclus, he comes to avenge his death, right? And we see Hector's body being maltreated, mistreated by um, Hector, sorry, by Achilles, and then we see that um, the story is towards the end. After this maltreatment happens, there are some funeral games that are organized, and after the funeral games, we see that Priam comes to Achilles to actually give a proper burial to the body of Hector, right? Priam is the father of Hector. So that at that moment we see that Hector finally, Hector is properly, you know, properly then given a burial. And then we see also a kind of a dialogue that ensues between Achilles and Priam, wherein Achilles actually uh, sort of realizes that his anger was an overreaction, right? That his anger has been a problem. And then we see he returns to normalcy. He, there is a humanistic aspect that comes in, and they both remember the episode, they both remember the episode, and then also the father-son kind of a relationship is also talked about. So, as we have been trying to understand that throughout the Iliad, there are ample references to what we understand as, both the war, right? because we said that the epic talks about major events like the war, but there is also a humanizing effect or an humanizing aspect that prevails through the entire epic, which we also see coming up in these episodes, right? So we'll now move on to the summary of book 17, and from book 17 to 24 we'll complete the summaries, and after that we'll be discussing some of the major issues, major questions that are important for you to understand both the book and also to answer your questions as far as your examinations are concerned. Now, another thing that I would want to say is that that this particular book you would find a lot of questions in terms of the fact that this book had been in the syllabus off and on. So for DU syllabus, Iliad had been prescribed for a number of times. So you would get a lot of questions on the book if you try searching, probably even online, right? But we'll discuss the major themes, and on the basis of those, I hope you will be able to answer the questions. Now, book 17. Menolos kills Euphorbus. Fierce battle ensues for the body of Patroclus. Apollo rouses Hector against Menolos, who is forced to withdraw. Hector tears the armor of Patroclus, but before the body can be taken away, great Ajax charges him and Hector leaps on his chariot. He puts on the newly acquired armor. Zeus does not quite approve of the armor of Achilles being taken by Hector. Anyway, the Trojans are granted some victory, as Hector is soon doomed to die. The battle rages on for the body of Patroclus, right? So at this moment, we said that, Greeks paid a lot of emphasis also on the proper burial of the dead, right? So you see that, this intervention of the gods also, that Zeus does not quite approve of the armor of Achilles being taken by Hector. And we will also see, how when Hector's body is mistreated, then how are the gods also disapproving of it, right? But you see that, the battle is mostly about the body, the dead body. So the goddess Athena gives strength to Menolos, but the Greeks are again threatened. But Zeus does not allow the body of Patroclus to be taken by the Trojans. Apollo appears to Aeneas in the guise of a loyal herald to provoke him. Aeneas recognizes Apollo and he shouts at Hector not to let Patroclus's body be taken by the Greeks. Achilles as yet does not know of the death of Patroclus. Antilochus is sent to Achilles with this sad news, though the Greeks know that he will be of little help without his armor. Menolos and Meriones carry off Patroclus's body to the Greek camp. The two Ajaxes fight off the Trojans, but the Argives flee in fear. The battle rages on, and Hector and Aeneas pursue the Greeks. Right? So we finish at the moment where Hector gives a blow to Patroclus, and Patroclus predicts the death of Hector, right? And he says that it was by the intervention of the gods that he was killed, and it is not only Hector that would have been able to kill Patroclus. Now you see that the body is being talked about, Patroclus's body is being talked about, and Zeus and Apollo, who are the Greek gods, are interfering so that Patroclus's body is not taken away. And finally, the news is also to be delivered to Achilles, who is the protagonist of the story and also Patroclus's dear friend. So we see that this is what we have in this particular book. Now book 18. As Achilles sits in his ship worrying about Patroclus, Antilochus comes with the news of his death and the loss of his armor. Achilles is overwhelmed with grief, and his wrenching cry is heard by his mother, Thetis and her sisters, the Nereids, dwelling under the sea. She, along with her sisters, come up to Achilles. Achilles tells her that he is going to the battle to avenge the death of his dear friend by killing Hector. She, along with her sisters, come up to Achilles, and now Thetis warns him that he will die shortly after the death of Hector. But if he must go on for the battle, then she will get for him a set of armor from Hephaestus, the god of fire. As the tussle goes on for the body of Patroclus, Hera sends Iris to Achilles with the message that at least he must go and stand near the trench to frighten the Trojans. Athena rings his head with a blazing cloud, and he lets out a cry. Along with Athena, and the combined shriek sends the wave of panic through the Trojan ranks. Evening comes and the day's battle ends. Taking advantage of the darkness, the Greeks drag the body of Patroclus out of range and lay him on a litter. Right, so this is what has happened. Achilles has been informed about the death of Patroclus, and um, he's terribly hurt, terribly angry again. And Thetis tells him at this point, this is also important, that Achilles knows that if he goes back to the battle at this point of time, then he's about to get killed, right? But he chooses to go to battle, and then Thetis asks him to wait so that she can get for him a an armor from Hephaestus, who's the god of fire. Remember, Patroclus had worn the armor of Achilles and he has died. His armor is also damaged, right? So this is Thetis would now ask Hephaestus, who's the god of fire, to build another armor for her son Achilles. The Trojans meet in assembly, and Polydamas advises them to retreat inside of Troy and fight the Greeks led by Achilles from the ramparts. But Hector rejects the suggestion and decides to assault the Greek ships in the morning. The Greeks with Achilles clean the body of Patroclus, and Achilles vows that his friend's body will not be buried until he brings back the head and armor of Hector. Right, so this is Achilles' resolve now, that he will only bury the body of Patroclus when he has the head and armor of Hector. Thetis reaches the workshop of the fire god Hephaestus in Olympus. He is told what all has happened to Achilles and is requested to forge a set of new armor for Achilles. Hephaestus forges a great, massive shield on which is depicted the universe to which Achilles is returning. Through this shield, he is linked with heaven, earth, and sea. The shield has 5 concentric circles. On the first is forged the sun, the moon, the stars. On the second, 2 cities, one at peace, one at war. The seasons and scenes from pastoral life. The outermost layer depicts the sea. A sturdy helmet is also made along with greaves of pliant tin. This is brought to Thetis, who carries it to Achilles. Right, so the description of the armor and the shield is also given to us, and you see that the shield has this it is relating all the worlds, right? The cosmic universe to the heaven and to the seas, right? It also depicts the pastoral life. It also depicts both life in war, or a city at war and a city at peace, right? So we'll be talking about the shield again. So in book 18, night falls for the first time since book 10. The Sunless Interlude plays a key role in pacing, pitch, and drama of the poem, providing a lull in which both the characters and the reader can prepare for the intensity to come. This break from battle also serves to emphasize the significance of Achilles' desire to exact revenge upon Hector, right? So you understand that, of course, at those times, there is not much that can happen during the night, right? So the episodes wherein we have the action of the book taking place during the night are comparatively much less. So after book 10, we see that it is in book 18 that you have an episode of the night described. And we see that, of course, Achilles' if resolution is made, and of course, the tension, the drama in the poem, the drama in the epic is at its height now. The doomed plan's popularity among the Trojans is even more ironic given the availability of Polydamas's wise alternative to retreat into the city, right? So Hector at this point is not listening to the advice of Polydamas, right? And we know that at this point of time, it is Hector's death that is predicted. So this is ironical, right? That he is being advised, he does not take his advice, and then he also incurs huge losses to the Trojans, including the death of Hector. So Homer frequently uses the sensible Polydamas as a foil, or who's a foil, a character whose emotions or attitudes contrast with and thereby accentuate those of another character for the strong Hector. Right? So Polydamas can be called as a foil to the character of Hector. This technique proves quite effective in the scene. Hector's blindness emerges not only in the formulation of his own foolhardy plan, but also in his dismissal of a clearly superior option. Right? So Polydamas' suggestion what would have been a more pragmatic, more practical situation at this point of time, but Hector ignores that decision. Like the nighttime interlude, the forging of Achilles' new armor helps set a tone of dramatic expectation in the poem, right? So this is one of those scenes wherein, when Hephaestus is building the armor of Achilles and he's building that shield, and the shield is described in great detail. We understand, that at this point of time, a major event is going to happen, right? Achilles, who had been absent from the wars for so long, would return to war, and we'll see him at his full strength, at his full glory, right? So that is that magnitude. It is also brought forth by this episode. Now, the magnificence of armor's beauty seems to bespeak its equally magnificent strength. The language describing the shield proves especially compelling and constitutes an example of the literary device ekphrasis. Right, so this is important. You can note down some of the points regarding the shield. Sometimes you get a short note on Achilles' shield, right? So this is an example of literary device ekphrasis. Ekphrasis is a Greek word literally meaning description and refers to the description of visual art in poetic terms. So this device effectively allows Homer to filter an artistic subject through two layers of imaginative rendering. In the case of Achilles' shield, the use of ekphrasis allows Homer to portray poetically not only the images appearing on the metal, but also the effect of those images, right? So that is important, that it is not only about, what is there, or just giving the details about, what pictures are there or what things are built on the shield, but also to understand the impact, right? So this is like a use of a literary device which helps in, heightening the poetic craft at this point of time. So the ekphrasis here also serves to create a sense of contrast in the poem. The Iliad is highly compact narrative, compressing the turning points of a 10-year-old conflict into the few days of battle, right? So this is what we've already talked about, that Homer has picked and selected a very small event, right? The war goes on for 10 years, but we are looking at some of the days in the 9th year of the war. And then we're also looking at a very, very specific theme, which is the anger of Achilles. So the drama, the tension, because of the brevity, because of the very specificity of the episode, is actually a lot more heightened, right? It is a compact narrative in that sense. Of course, we understand that this epic is a long epic poem, but then considering the magnitude of the battle itself, it is actually a very small part of that. So the turning points in the battle, as we have noted, this is a major turning point now, and the passage of the shield expands the setting to a timeless universe, right? So talking about cities at war, talking about the sea, talking about the moons, the stars, and the cosmic forces. What is it really you know hinting at this point of time? Homer is actually hinting at the timelessness quality of the world, right? Wars may come, people may come and go, but this timeless quality of the nature of the universe remains. At this moment, the poet stands back from the details of physical violence and personal vendettas to contemplate the beauty of the larger cosmos in which they take place. Right? So, this is the larger significance of this particular book or this particular shield that we're talking about. Now, in book 19, the armor is given to Achilles, who gets ready to go for the battle but is afraid that his friend's body may rot. Thetis assures him that she will look after Patroclus's body. Now, Achilles must forget his rage, and tremendous courage is instilled in him. He calls the whole army to fight and apologizes to Agamemnon, calling a halt to his anger. Remember, he had decided not to go to war, and he had also taken away his army, the Myrmidon army. So he decided not to go to war because of a quarrel with Agamemnon, right? And Agamemnon had made an offer to appease Achilles, but Achilles did not relent at that point of time. So now he apologizes, he calls the whole army, and he says that he has to go to battle now. So King Agamemnon in his turn says that fate and the will of Zeus had made him act the way he did. Now he is intent on setting things right. He offers Achilles the priceless ransom promised earlier. Odysseus asks Achilles to allow the soldiers time to take their meal before going to battle. He agrees but refuses all nourishment himself, so Athena fills him with nectar and sweet ambrosia that will sustain his strength. Achilles then covers himself with all the gear made by Hephaestus and is ready for the battle. The horses of his chariot speak to him. The goddess Hera gives voice to the dumb beast. They will tell him that Patroclus could not be saved, as it was divine will that killed him, and Achilles won't also live for long now. Achilles knows it, but that knowledge does not stop him from fighting the Trojans. Right? So Achilles is so grief-stricken, Achilles is so angry that at one point of time he is not even thinking about the food of his army. Of course, Agamemnon, Odysseus, reminds him and he agrees. But then, he's completely overtaken, completely overwhelmed with what has happened to Patroclus, right? Although people tell him, the living beings are given, the horses of the chariot here at this point of time are given the voice and they speak to him, right? So although it is being told to us that it is Patroclus's death was also, according to divine will. It all happened according to divine will. So the anger of Achilles is kind of, even at this point, Achilles' anger is much beyond the measure that it should be at. So, but we understand, that he knows what is going to befell him, but he does not really, care about it. That he will not live long, that is not in his agenda right now. All that there is occupying his mind is that he should avenge the death of his dear friend. Now in book 20, Zeus allows the gods to give aid to any side of their choice. Accordingly, the gods help their respective favorites. Right? So remember, we had seen that Zeus had stopped and had asked all the gods not to participate or not to interfere in the battle, right? But now at this point in book 20, he allows the gods to give aid to any side of their choice. Now Aeneas is filled with the power by Apollo. Aeneas and Achilles fight, and Poseidon removes Aeneas from the battle to save his life. Achilles kills many Trojans. Hector is warned by Apollo not to fight Achilles alone. But when his brother Polydorus is killed, Hector charges Achilles. Athena diverts the weapon from Achilles. Apollo saves Hector, similarly in a protective mist. Achilles is angry with Apollo for intervening and keeps on killing other Trojans. Right? So the gods are now allowed and they're supporting their favorites, and therefore you see that again Apollo has advised Hector not to uh, fight alone, but then as with the death of Polydorus, who's his brother, Hector charges Achilles. So although Achilles has reconciled with Agamemnon, his other actions in book 19 and 20 indicate that he has made little progress as a character, right? So talking about the characterization, this is sort of important, that um, he has reconciled with Agamemnon, but his character, his anger that the theme of the book is about, has not really changed. He still demonstrates a tendency toward the thoughtless rage that has brought so many Achaeans or Greeks to their deaths. He remains so intent on vengeance that he initially intends for the men to go into battle without food, which could prove suicidal in form of warfare that involves such great expenditures of physical energy. Similarly, on the battlefield, Achilles demonstrates an obsessive concern with victory to the exclusion of all other considerations. So you see that at this point of time, as he said, that Achilles is so overwhelmed with grief, with anger, with his sense of revenge, that he does not consider anything else. These books of the poem concern themselves not only with the motivations and consequences of characters' actions, but also with the forces at work outside direct human agency. In particular, Agamemnon speaks of the powers of Zeus and fate, blaming them for his stubbornness in the quarrel with Achilles. Right? So, as we saw, that the intervention of the gods is much here. Right? So, here in this book, when Achilles comes back to Agamemnon saying that he wants to go back to battle, Agamemnon reminds him that whatever quarrels that there were between Achilles and Agamemnon were a result of direct intervention by the powers of the gods, right? By Zeus, and what was decided by fate. So no other force another force repeatedly invoked here and throughout the Iliad is fate. Despite the constant references to it, however, we never attain a clear sense of fate's properties, right? So time and again we see that fate is being talked about in the Iliad, but then in terms of how much role does fate play, now when we will be coming to probably when you would be also reading other books, other and other poems and plays that are a part of this course, you'll understand that um, fate and free will and all of that is like a major question. But to not mistake it here, because it is a different sort of a world and a different sort of ethos, right? So the question of fate comes up again and again. But then, we cannot really say on the basis of on the basis of how the gods define it or how the humans talk about it, what are the exact properties of fate? How does it really pan out, right? So, in that sense, we see that in the book, in the Iliad, although fate is always talked about, we do not know how much of a role does it really play, how much of it is a part of human action, how much of it is a part of the question of what is decided for the individual character or what is decided by his fate. So in book 21, Achilles pushes the Trojan warriors into the river Xanthus and kills many of them, taking 12 of them captive when he is tired. The river, angry at the bloodshed, asks Achilles to stop killing the Trojans. When he refuses, Xanthus sends giant waves to drown Achilles and calls on a fellow river, Similes, to help him. Achilles runs up an embankment to save his life. Hera asks her son Hephaestus to intervene, and he sends again a great fire on the stream that almost burns it up. Athena and Poseidon urge Achilles to fight on and kill Hector. The gods fight among themselves. Ares attacks Athena, who holds a stone at him. He is badly injured, and when Aphrodite comes to his help, she is also knocked down. Poseidon reminds Apollo of the wrong done to both of them by Laomedon, an earlier king of Troy. On Zeus's order, both Apollo and Poseidon had labored for Laomedon for stated wages, but they were never paid and were ill-treated in every way. So now they should not favor the Trojans. Apollo does not want to fight with him, for that his sister Artemis taunts him, but Hera boxes her ears and sends her to Olympus in tears. Right? So you see the quarrels and the sort of trivia that we see among the gods happening here, right? So which is again a site of comic interlude sort of which we see in this book. So down below, Achilles goes on killing the Trojans, and Priam orders the gates of Troy to open, to let in the Trojans fleeing from Achilles as the Greeks reach the gates in hot pursuit. Agenor stands there to fight Achilles. Achilles leaps at Agenor, but Apollo whisks him off. Apollo, taking the shape of Agenor, makes Achilles change him in the wild fields, and Trojans get the opportunity to enter the city walls. Right? So at this point, the battle has taken a turn. Now, Book 22, Hector's parents fervently request him to take shelter inside the walls of Troy and not face Achilles, who's sure to kill him. Hector feels he should have listened to Polydamas that when he wanted the Trojans to take shelter inside Troy. Now that so many Trojans have been killed, Hector must face Achilles either to kill or be killed. He wavers again, thinking that he can save himself by going to Achilles, offering him Helen with all her riches, along with the treasures of Troy. Then he realizes that will not be of help, and it is better to clash in battle and see who wins. Seeing Achilles, all of a sudden, Hector loses his nerve and runs in fear. Right? So you see that we've been talking about Hector as this noble hero who's, always interested to fight and always, regains his strength and valor. But at this point of time, when he is faced with fate and also the overwhelming, overpowering sort of anger from Achilles, he is also afraid and he is also thinking of fleeing. So 3 times they run around the city of Troy. Athena comes to help Achilles. She deceives Hector in the shape of Euphorbus, his brother, by offering to help and lures him into facing Achilles. Hector throws a spear at Achilles. He is now without any lance, so he calls Euphorbus for one, but there is nobody to listen to him. Now Hector knows that his final moment has come, as Athena has tricked him, but he resolves to earn glory through struggle before his death. Right? So we were talking about how glory is important, and although Hector now knows that his fate has brought him here and he's about to get killed, but he now starts to understand that he will fight for his glory through struggle. So Hector and Achilles fight, only for Hector to be killed by Achilles. With his last breath, Hector begs Achilles to give his body to his friends so that he is given a proper burial. Achilles angrily rejects his appeal and declares that dogs and scavenger birds will eat his dead body. With his last breath, Hector foretells the death of Achilles. Hector's body is fastened to the chariot of Achilles and dragged through the dust to the Greek lines. Hector's parents wail and mourn. Priam wants to go and appeal to Achilles to hand over the body to him. Andromache is weaving at her loom and preparing Hector's path when the sound of wailing reaches her. She reaches the tower and sees the terrible sight of Hector being dragged by Achilles. She faints and coming to um, cries for her dead husband. She mourns for her fatherless son who will suffer humiliation with nobody to save him from um, from that, right? So you see that at this point now Achilles has killed Hector and he's dragging the body of Hector. He's denied Hector, who pleaded to him in his last moments that he should give him proper burial, but he says, that his body would be now eaten by dogs and scavenger birds. And the news reaches Hector's parents and also his wife, who are uh, who are completely devastated with the news. And you see that the entire city is crying for the death of Hector. So interconnections between events seem to indicate that the universe has a cyclical or balanced nature. One swing of the pendulum leads to another, and an individual's actions come back to haunt him. Right? So you see that at this point, Hector realizes what he's done and what is going to happen to him. So it moves like in a cycle, right? It is like something. Every action would have a reaction, right? So you see that this kind of a sort of cyclical nature is given to us, that it is all interconnected. Now, the final duel between Achilles and Hector becomes not only a duel of heroes but also of heroic values. While Achilles proves superior to Hector in terms of strength and endurance, he emerges as inferior in terms of his integrity. His mistreatment of Hector's body is a disgrace, compounded by the cruelty in which he allows the rank and file of his army to indulge. As we have seen, Achilles engages in such indignities quite routinely, and does so not out of any real principle but out of uncontrollable rage. Hector, on the other hand, entirely redeems whatever flaws he displays in the preceding books. His refusal to return to the safety of Troy's walls after witnessing deaths brought about by his foolish orders to camp outside the city demonstrates his mature willingness to suffer the consequences of his actions. His rejection of a desperate attempt at negotiation in favor of the honorable course of battle reveals his ingrained sense of personal dignity. Right, so the faults or the flaws that we saw in Hector's character are kind of redeemed here, in terms of that he chooses to face Achilles and chooses to face the battle. Of course, at one point he is all afraid and reluctant to go to battle, but then he realizes what he's done, and he also realizes that he cannot let his soldiers die alone, right? So no matter what is going to happen, although he knows that his death is near, he chooses to go to the battlefield to fight. And Achilles, on the other hand, you see that his heroic values, his heroic character is actually not not really brought forth here, because he might be a great warrior, he might be a man with strength, but he's not a man with integrity, in that he indulges in these kind of insults and indignities, right? Remember that the kind of quarrels that Achilles has held with other people at various points of time are also very, very indignant, right? They are also scathing attacks, and his anger is responsible for all of that. So he does not consider anything else above his anger. So this is what we see happening here now. Now we are moving on to the second last book, and after we finish book 23 and 24 and the analysis, I'll take up your questions, and then we'll proceed with talking about the themes and the major issues in the book. So the burial of Patroclus is arranged with timber from Mount Ida and animal and human sacrifices. Achilles has a dream of the ghost of Patroclus requesting to be buried quickly and for his bones to be buried alongside those of Achilles. Achilles orders his men to do everything as his dead friend desired. He cuts down his own red gold locks and places them in his friend's hand. He kills 12 Trojans and places their bodies on the same pyre as Patroclus. But Hector's body he resolves to give to the dogs. This is not acceptable to the gods. Aphrodite beats off the dogs from Hector's body and anoints it with ambrosial oil of roses so that his skin will not rip while being dragged by Achilles. Apollo brings down a dark cloud to safeguard the body of Hector from the sun's fury. Achilles offers libations to the west and north wind, Zephyr and Boreas, so that Patroclus's fire burns properly. His prayer is granted, and the flames burn fiercely as Achilles weeps, dragging himself around the pyre. At dawn, Agamemnon and his followers come out to collect the bones and place them in the golden urn. The last embers are put out with wine, and a tomb is erected. Games are proposed in his honor, and all the Greek heroes participate to pay homage to Patroclus. Right, so this is what has happened now. It is talking about the burial of Patroclus, and Patroclus appears to Achilles in a dream, and he asks for his quick burial and his bones to be buried alongside Achilles. And then you see that, Hector's body that Achilles is constantly mistreating is also now um, kind of protected by the gods, and they also the gods also ensure a proper burial for the body of Patroclus. Achilles organizes these games, these funeral games, right? And so this is a tradition, right? So Achilles organizes these funeral games in the honor of his friend Patroclus, and he of course does not participate in the games, but he's we see that these funeral games are organized to honor the body of Patroclus. Now in book 24, though everything is over, the death of Patroclus avenged, rituals done, and homage paid to him, Achilles cannot overcome his sorrow for his friend. He weeps and drags Hector's body round the tomb of Patroclus. This goes on for 12 days. Hector's body is protected by Apollo, so it is not disfigured by all that is done to it. The gods are not happy with Achilles' behavior, who has lost all pity. Zeus decrees that Achilles may receive a ransom from King Priam, but he must give back Hector's body, so he summons Thetis to his presence. She is ordered to tell her son that Zeus is angry with him and must give back Hector's body. Zeus sends Iris down to Priam, telling him to carry ransom to Achilles to assuage his rage and bring home his son's body. Thetis goes to Achilles, bearing the message of Zeus, and he agrees to give back the body of Patroclus. Priam gets ready to go to Achilles as ordered by Zeus. He collects rich gifts and treasures to be handed to Achilles. Before he starts, Hecuba, who is the mother of Hector, brings a golden cup of honeyed wine to be poured in honor of Zeus, so he grants him safe return. Priam washes his hands and pours the wine to earth. He prays to Zeus to send him a bird of good omen. Zeus hears his prayer and sends an eagle that sweeps through the city. Then Priam drives towards the Greek ships. Hermes is ordered by Zeus to conduct Priam through the Greek ships so that none will see him. Hermes talks to Priam in the guise of one of Achilles' men. He assures Priam that the body of Hector is intact and uncorrupted. Priam is overjoyed to hear this and offers him a handsome cup. Hermes safely drives the chariot of Priam inside Achilles' shelter and then introduces himself. He tells Priam that now he should go in and clasp Achilles' knees to make him yield to his request. Right, so you see that Achilles is not really, Achilles is still very angry. And only when Priam reaches him and the sort of an ending ensues, that he understands what he's done, but of course, his anger is such that it is not all safe for Priam also, right? To go there. So Hermes is the one who helps him, and the gods also tell him that his son's body is intact and uncorrupted, and that it will be granted to him for a proper burial. So this is how the book ends. Now Priam goes to Achilles, going down on his knees. He appeals to Achilles to think of his own father, and both Priam and Achilles weep, one for his dead son, the other for his father, and for his friend. Achilles takes pity on the old man and offers him a seat. He tells him that excessive grief does not serve any purpose, as Zeus gives mixed blessing and sorrows to mortals. Even Peleus, Achilles' father, has his share of growth. He married a goddess, but he will not have a son to care for him in old age. As Achilles is destined to die shortly, Achilles orders the body of Hector to be washed and wrapped in finely woven shirt brought by Priam. Hector's body is cleaned and wrapped and placed on a bier by Achilles himself. He then offers food to Priam, orders a proper bed for him, and agrees to hold back hostilities for 11 days, the time required for the burial. In a short while, Hermes comes to urge Priam to leave the Greek camp with his son's body before Agamemnon catches him. Hermes guides them back safely. Once they reach Troy, the whole city is plunged in grief. Andromache, who's the wife of Hector, mourns him. Foreseeing her future as a slave of the Greeks, she fears the worst for her son, now that his father is not there to save him. Hecuba and Helen cry in grief, Helen miserable in Hector's death for the gentleness he had shown. And then Hector is buried, all Troy bidding him a tearful farewell. Right, so you see now that this is the moment. Now Achilles is actually protecting Priam also, who's the father of Hermes, from Agamemnon, because he has resolved that he will guarantee the proper burial of Hector now, and he himself cleans the body of Hector. He himself, takes care of Priam. So it is his responsibility now, as and he also talks about his father Peleus. He talks about his intermittent death and his imminent death, and he also speaks about now the kind of bond, the kind of the kind of bond of life that there is, that happiness and sorrow is there for everybody, right? So it is not nice, it is not fair enough to be overstrucken by grief. Although you see that it is ironical in that sense that Achilles himself was kind of overtaken by the grief of his friend Patroclus, but he has regained his senses now, and he knows of his death, and he says to Priam to not be overstricken by grief. So the games at Patroclus' funeral serve primarily as a buffer between two climactic events, which is the death of Hector and his burial. Right? So this is the significance of the funeral games, or the games at Patroclus' funeral, that they are like an interlude, a buffer between two events that are really important and ending events, events of climax. One is the death of Hector, and the second is the burial. So the games function for the reader as much as they do for the characters as a diversion from grief. This change seems to stem from the development of Achilles' character. Having begun the epic as a temperamental, prideful, selfish, and impulsive man, Achilles shows himself in Book 24 to possess a great sense of sympathy for others. Throughout the poem, Homer charts Achilles' inability to think beyond himself. His wounded pride makes him stubbornly allow the other Achaeans to suffer defeat, and his rage at Patroclus' death makes him utterly disrespect the noble Hector's corpse. Now, however, Achilles not only respects triumphantly by returning Hector's body, but also allows the Trojan people a reprieve from the battle in order to honor and grieve their hero thoroughly and properly. That Achilles' change of heart occasions the poem's conclusion emphasizes the centrality of Achilles' rage to the poem. Homer chooses to conclude the Iliad not with the death of Achilles or the fall of Troy, but rather with the withering of Achilles' mighty wrath. Right? So the theme is maintained, sustained throughout the poem, and the poem ends with the withering quality of Achilles' mighty wrath now. That his anger is actually subsiding now, and he's realized what his anger does, and this is the kind of theme that we see in the poem. Now before we move on to the other themes and a basic analysis of the book itself, the important aspects, I'll be looking at your questions, class, and if you have any up until now, then you can you can write them down in your chat box, and then after that discussion for about 10-12 minutes, I'll come back to the themes and important aspects, and probably if you have anything else, then we can take it up in the last few minutes of the class. Okay, so there are not many questions at this point of time. Okay, right. So I'll just answer the ones that there are. One question is that if everybody knew their fate, why were they acting at all? Right? Why were they fighting so fiercely? Now, the answer to this question can be actually given by two aspects. One is that although everybody knows their fate, right? They are actually performing whatever actions they are destined to perform, right? So if death is certain, so is also the action that is certain. Another thing is, which is more important to this aspect of fighting and struggling that they do, is because of the fact of glory, right? So in the Greek world, what they want to actually attain is glory, is personal glory, which we called as kleos, right? Which the Greeks called as kleos. So they're fighting as a, as this measure of attaining that glory, despite knowing that they are doomed to die, despite knowing that, in a battle, death is almost certain, right? They continue to fight to attain that honor, to attain that glory. As for your WhatsApp group, class, I had asked, somebody to send the link. If they send it over, I'll probably paste it here for you to see. Now, another opinion that is given by another student here, she says that she does not think of Achilles as a bad person. He's a great warrior and has a great value for relationships. And what he does with Agamemnon is a way of showing his hurt self-respect, because Agamemnon also never considers anyone when it comes to dignity or equality, right? So this is, of course, true in that sense that, as far as Agamemnon is concerned too, Agamemnon and Achilles have a quarrel for the honor, for their pride. And we are not anywhere saying, throughout the three classes, if you've noticed, we had been pointing out at that fact that nobody is completely dismissed as a bad character or as a bad guy, so to say, right? Every person in the book has both of these sides, right? They're also good, they're also bad. Both of these sides are shown. Every person, even mortals, even immortals, are all gray. characters. They're all endowed with human qualities, of both, having those flaws and also having that nobility. So Achilles also, in terms of attaining that glory, in terms of being that great warrior, in terms of being so stricken with the death of his friend that he chooses to fight despite knowing that if he enters the battlefield now and kills Hector, he is also supposed to die. Right? That is something that Thetis completely makes clear to him. But then you're right there that he is not a completely bad character, but nobody is in this book, right? Even Agamemnon, there are points in which Agamemnon is shown to be either sympathetic towards his, towards his soldiers. He also realizes that he has not done quite right with Achilles also. So there is no completely negative character in this book. That is what Homer has really done as a part of his characterization. Priam is Hector's father. He does go to Achilles to get the body of his son. So somebody is asking whether the Greeks would have won if the gods have not helped them. Probably, if you see, it is not only about the gods helping them, but it is also about the strength of both armies, right? So Greek army with Achilles, with the Myrmidon tribe supporting them, is actually very strong. So probably, if there was no play of if there was no play of how gods intervene and what is decided, what is fated, we cannot say what would have been the result, but then it was also fate that had decided that the Greeks would win. Zeus is, of course, the head god who heads over the Mount Olympus. Yes, the PDF that I shared is a copy of the original book. Diomedes, we said, is a young warrior, and his role is when Achilles is not participating in the battle. He is the one who takes over and supports his side to a great deal. Yeah. So Homer, we had discussed the Homeric question. Somebody is asking about, Homer was named but not identified. Um, Now, Homer, we said that either he could be one person or he could be a group of poets. There has been a lot of academic scholarly debate about that question. Considering the aspects of the literary aspects of the poem, both arguments are made. But the edition that we're referring to, Bernard Knox in that edition says, sorry, if you review in this edition says that, it cannot be that a lot of poets gathered and wrote this book, because you see the unity and the comprehension in the poem. It seems like the work of one author. Yeah, so I'll be sharing the link. Just give me one question. Format of the question paper, you can look at, previous question papers. You will be able to share that. Yeah. I'm just sharing the WhatsApp link. Yeah. In terms of the gods, we'll be talking about the role of gods just now. Achilles does not really regret, the killing of Hector. He is, he realizes that his action of mistreatment of the body of Hector was something which was not very heroic or very human on his part. That is what all there is, right? He is not regretting that he's killed Hector. Yeah, we'll be talking about the gods. Yes, the number that you're sharing is my number. I've just you'll probably now I'll just put that. You can note this down for the WhatsApp group, and probably you can join using the same. Right. So class, now I'll be coming to the themes and the questions. Right. Some of the major issues in the poem and some of the major themes there. Right. So after that, after we complete that, we'll be able to look at other questions that you might have from the poem now. Okay, so a couple of questions have again come in. Let me just look at them and then we can move on to the theme and the summary. So, she had been abducted by the Trojans, of course. So this question is asking, who was Helen really supporting, right? So Helen is actually she is also shown in terms of being in a dilemma in terms of who to support, who is right and who is wrong in the battle, right? So she mourns the death of Hector because Hector had always been kind to her, always been friendly with her, gentle with her. That is why she mourns the death of Hector, right? And you remember that we also said that she says that she does not approve of Paris not having any self-respect, right? She also feels that at some point that the entire battle and everything is happening because of her. So she takes the entire blame as well. So there are constant moments as far as the character of Helen is also concerned, wherein she is also facing that dilemma, right? How to resolve this? Who is right? Who is wrong? What is going on? Because she sees also the massive death and destruction that is happening during the war, right? And if the war is initiated because of her, of course, she's to feel a lot of this confusion and this kind of a difficulty, that so to say. Yeah, so the original copy, this is one of the translation, and it is one of the translation of that PDF or the PDF that I've given to you. It is like one translation. You can look at it, but it would be better if you get the original book, of course, right? I had given the PDF, so that you have some sort of reference. But then if you want to go through the entire thing, because it does not contain any of the introduction and everything, so you can refer to the original book. Please refer to the original book rather than just going by the PDF. Yeah, we'll be talking about the gods and about the format of the question paper, guys. um, I'll probably discuss it in the next class, looking at the question paper. I'm not too sure right now in terms of how many questions, what marks. I do not remember it very, very clearly. So I'll just look at it again and then return to that in the next class. Okay, so I'm going back to the themes and to the major issues, which will also be, important for you to answer your questions. And then, if you have any other questions, I can then, talk about them at the end of the class. I think most of your doubts would be resolved when we talk about, these themes that we need to speak about. Okay. So the Homeric gods, a lot of you are asking the question about the Homeric gods. So these gods and goddesses are anthropomorphic divinities, right? So I already told you about this word, anthropomorphic, meaning they have human characteristics, except that they are not mortal, right? So they cannot die, but in terms of qualities that they have, in terms of the flaws and the kind of, the kind of qualities that they have, they are endowed with human characteristics. So a god is always given due respect by Homer whenever he refers to any. The gods have unlimited powers and the contrast is sharp between the carefree happiness of the gods and the suffering of the mankind, right? So the gods, whatever is happening, whatever tiny squabbles, whatever quarrels that they're involved in, you generally see that the gods are merry, right? They are carefree. That is because, as we said, that the tragedy of human life is that it is about life and death. But for the gods, since they're immortal, that is not the case. So, but they have a lot of power, right? So that is not anywhere denied by Homer, right? He talks about the petty things that the gods fight over, but then also to say that they have unlimited strength, they have unlimited power, they can really influence things. So the Greek society was founded by gods. Every race traced its descent from a particular hero, son of a divinity. The Dorians traced their descent from Heracles, the son of Zeus, and the Ionians from Ion, the son of Apollo. The gods and goddesses had children whose mothers or fathers were mortal. Right? So that is how we can talk about the importance of gods in Greek society then. That, as we said, that gods would have probably children with mortals, and then these children, the progeny of these children, or these children will continue the race in terms of also an entire tribe being named after those gods and the sons of those gods. So every force of nature is looked upon as a manifestation of a particular god or goddesses. Now this is the relevance of the gods in that society. All mysterious power in nature is divine power, and prophecy speaks out their intention and motivation. For the Greeks, the whole of nature, streams, woods, and trees, were peopled with divine spirits. Since gods cannot die, only men have true dignity in the battlefield through their death-defying courage, right? So this is something that we have emphasized, that gods do not die, cannot die. Therefore, it is the mortals, right, who have more importance in terms of, that they show extreme courage. They show death-defying courage in terms of fighting the battle. When the gods descend to battle, they are not facing the fear of death, but humans are. Therefore, you can see, that the importance of what is happening in the humanly world in terms of war and the destruction that it brings is much more than what happens with the gods. So at the same time, compared to divine power, man's condition is unimportant with severe limitations. The art of forecasting the future developed early in Greece. Holy men like Tiresias, now Tiresias is of course somebody you would have heard about when you are discussing Oedipus, and others predicted the future and indicated the shape of things to come. Certain omens, like the flight of birds in a particular direction, showed whether conditions were favorable or not, right? So you saw that the eagle was flown over by Zeus, foretelling that it is bringing a good omen. Now, before undertaking any venture, the Greeks always consulted the seers who knew how to interpret omens and signs. They knew the art of determining what will happen in the future. In other words, they practiced divination. All through the Iliad, they sacrificed animals to propitiate the gods and wait for the right signs before they start anything. Right? So this is how the gods are relevant, right? In terms of actually naming the entire clan after them, right? After the sons of God, having children with them, right? And then being endowed with these human characteristics, and also gods having tremendous power, although we see that they cannot really alter fate, right? So in the case of Zeus's son Sarpedon, we saw that he cannot, Zeus also cannot alter the fate of that character, right? Although Zeus is the presiding deity, he has the power to, but he stopped because what does Hera tell him at that point? That if he actually does it for Sarpedon, his own son, if he changes or alters his fate, then it means that other deities would also, other gods will also come to save their own. That would interfere with whatever is planned by fate, right? So she stops him. It does not mean that gods do not have the power to change the course of fate, but it only means that they can choose not to, right? So another thing that we're looking at is the epic simile, right? So this is another question, apart from the role of gods, that you can get about the epic simile. So the epic similes are prolonged similes to fit the epic, which is a prolonged poem, right? So epic similes are really long similes. The best features of the Iliad, these similes always portray the normal world of ordinary activities and natural way compared and contrasted with the ways of the heroes and the warlike ways of the protagonists, right? So this is what happens. Epic similes, we also, giving some sort of examples of the epic similes. If you have read the Iliad, or if you're beginning to read the book, you will realize that these similes are really long, right? And we said that the epic is in terms of the oral poetic tradition, right? And the poets had to memorize the epic to actually pass it from generation to generation orally. So what happens is that these epic similes actually help in that. Another thing is that they kind of portray the normal ordinary activities, right? So they'll probably talk about the pastoral life, the agricultural life, they'll talk about the ways of animals, cattle, etc. Talking about ordinary things away from the conflict, away from the war. So these similes portray scenes that bring out particular episodes, events and situations vividly before our eyes. Of course, it is not to say that it does not only talk about, the ordinary activities, but similes are also, used for the war heroes. The poet wants us to savor life in all its many-sided splendor. The full impact of a particular episode is brought about by a simile illuminating the whole scene, right? So you would see that for the episode also, the simile would be used. Of course, I think all of you know what is a simile, right? So similes are, of course, comparisons, right? So when we compare one thing with another using like or as, generally, we have a simile, right? So you see that this is not a simple simile that we have in as far as the epic simile is concerned. It is not she's as beautiful as the rose, right? That is not the kind of simile that we're talking about. In the epic simile, it is a long simile which is talking about a lot of aspects. And as far as the Iliad is concerned, as far as the epic is concerned, you see that the emphasis is laid on particular instances in particular episodes by talking about or by comparing it with some other thing, right? So in book 17, you see one of these similes. There he lay like an olive slip, a farmer rears to strength on a lonely hilltop, drenching it down with water, a fine young stripling tree, and the wind stirred it softly, rustling from every side, and it burst with silver shoots. Then suddenly a wind in gale force comes storming, rips it out of its trench, stretches it out on the earth, right? So this is an entire epic simile. You see the kind of length that it is, right? So it is not just like an olive slip that it is a simile. You see that the simile is extended. It talks about, the entire process of what is happening to this, right? And you see that it comes back with the same image, right? So we are looking at a very beautiful sort of image here about, about which is a pastoral image, which is an agricultural sort of image. This is what is being portrayed here. Now, the comparison in a Homeric simile of an object or action or event with another one is developed beyond the specific points of comparison between the two. Right? So we saw that this is not only ending with, sorry, there he lay like an olive slip, a farmer rears to strength. Right? So like an olive slip is not the final simile that we see here. It is an extended simile. It is developed beyond this point or specific point of comparison, which is just an olive slip. But the simile brings out effectively a particular event or a scene. The scene is described through the simile. At the same time, it shows the poet's power of observation, providing us with a significant explanation of the episode it seeks to illustrate. Right. So this would become clear when you will be reading, passages from the book, wherein you would be seeing that, in terms of how Homer uses the simile to highlight the significance of particular episodes in the epic. This is also how, much observation power comes into play. We see the poet's keen observation, how he's able to develop that small image, right? His poetic skill also comes to the fore. His observational skills come to the fore. That small image is developed into an extended image of a simile, and it is conveyed through that. Then also the description of character is vividly made through these similes. In book 20, Homer paints Achilles as a force of a sheer destructive energy, inhuman both physically and ethically. Right? So we were saying that Homer is not really, evaluating characters, right? That is one argument that we were saying. That a lot of people, a lot of critics say that Homer himself says in the book that he is, he's writing with the invocation, with the inspiration from the muses. He is only reporting events, right? But you see that by the use of these epic similes, he's also talking, or he's also describing the character, right? And he does not talk of the character directly. Of course, when you're looking, or when you're employing a simile, when you're using a simile, you're building an indirect sort of comparison, right? So the description of the character also comes out in a better way, right? So in book 20, when we are looking at, Achilles being extremely angry and mistreating um, Hector, we see that this is Homer does not convey that only in terms of giving the details, but also through the epic simile. That event is described, that that portrait of Achilles is also described. So another theme that we'll be talking about is the theme of war. Of course, the epic is about war, and we also understand that it is pitted against, that many times Homer is actually talking of peace. Homer is actually talking about how soldiers want to return home, how all of them, tired by the 9 or 10 years of war, want to go back. So the traditional myths and songs were the main source for Homer, but he added much that was his own, right? So what do we mean by that? That we said that the story or the events of the epic happened in 13th century BC, and the Iliad was written sometime around 8th century BC, right? So you see that all of this, all of the story, all of what was happening, all the songs and everything was already there in the traditional source of knowledge. And Homer, so this point is really about the contribution of Homer. So although the traditional myths and songs were known, it is, Homer who adds a lot of originality in terms of the descriptions that he gives, in terms of, how he humanizes the whole conflict, how he humanizes his characters in the times of war. So he enlivened the primitive tales with a generous and tender vision of life. All of Homer's characters, even those to whom he pays little attention, like swineherds, ordinary soldiers, serving women, worthless suitors, are real and convincing people. Each episode abounds in the endless variety of human conduct. Homer himself never obtrudes, hardly ever passes judgment. He gave a whole new vision of the world, of the gods at their appointed tasks, of men and women pursuing their destinies, of every mood from grim vengeance to uproarious farce, of palaces and gardens, remote islands and rocky shores. Homer's poetry was probably set down in writing within his own lifetime. Right, so another aspect that we've been talking about, of course, critics have agreed and disagreed on several points. So it is talking about the characterization of Homer, that every character feels and looks real, right? So the kind of characters, even the ordinary characters, even the characters who are not really important in the epic, all of those characters also are very convincing, very real people. And Homer does not pass judgment. There are no passages in which Homer would be, telling us how to feel about a character or how to judge a character. He will describe them, he will talk about other people's reactions to the character. That is how he describes them, rather, right? So it is, he talks about a variety of things actually that come within the ambit of an epic, that it talks from the smallest of things to the largest of things. That is the grand scale that the epic works on. So he talks about a variety of emotion, he talks about a variety of human conduct, he talks about variety of human characters. So all of that is a part of how Homer's poetic skill is woven into the poem. Now the Iliad is concerned with heroes. Ordinary soldiers are not given much attention, right? So that is another thing. When we are saying that he pays attention to the ordinary soldiers, it is also that they're not given that kind of a place that they overpower or overtake heroes. The epic is about the heroes. It is about their heroic qualities. It is about this age of heroism, right? So that is the main emphasis. It is not like that he details, since he gives details about the ordinary soldiers, they acquire a lot of importance, right? They are detailed as characters. They are given their due life likeness, but it does not mean that they occupy a central place in the epic. So in a battle, what matters is glory, not victory or defeat, right? So that is something that we were talking about, that it does not matter whether they win or whether they lose. In a battle, even though they know whether they are going to lose or whether they are going to win, all of that does not really matter. What matters is the question of glory, right? So the glory, the struggle, the honor that comes from fighting the battle, from dying in a battle, from winning in a battle, all of that is what is more important, what is more necessary to them, rather than anything which is about victory or defeat. Now, defeat, heroically endured, is glorious. Perhaps a little less than victory, the epic is a high tragedy. So we said that, as is with Hector's character, we saw that his death is heroic and glorious because he chooses to fight despite knowing his end, right? Knowing that he is going to now be killed by Achilles, but he is still, fighting that battle. So it brings more heroism, it brings more, glory to his death. So although victory or winning is, something more glorious, displays more strength, displays, brings more honor, but then defeat, if it is heroically endured, if people do not flee from battle, if they do not, if they have the courage to face, their opponent, then that is also a matter of glory, a matter of pride, which is given its due significance, its due importance in the epic. Now, the epic is a high tragedy. What do we mean by that? We said that Homer is probably Homer is one poet, and he wrote two epics. At least two epics are credited to the name of Homer. So one epic is the Iliad, which we've been doing. The other is Odysseus, right? So Odysseus is an epic which talks about, we have seen the character of Odysseus here. So Odysseus is, a comedy. That epic is kind of a comic epic in terms of it has a comic resolution at the end, right? But this epic is a tragedy. We understand that at the end of the epic also, the hero's death is certain, right? So if Achilles is our protagonist, we understand that Achilles had suffered, right? So all through the epic we see Achilles is suffering, and we also see that his death is certain. So it is a kind of a tragedy. It is about conflict. And the seriousness of that conflict, what it brings to the characters in the epic. So it is a high tragedy. Now Achilles, who's the central figure, the great fighter, is brought down by his anger, right? So it is the anger of Achilles which is responsible for what happens to him. In the Iliad, paradoxical values of war and peace are both upheld. Peace is desirable and destruction of cities is nightmarish, right? So related with probably, the shield, the armor of Achilles that is built, that it has both things, right? It has a city, it depicts a city at war and it depicts a city at peace. And even through, our entire discussion on the epic, you would have seen that we've been constantly talking about, or Homer is constantly giving instances about people remembering nostalgically about peaceful environments, peaceful places, and yearning for them, right? So it is about peace that the epic is actually thinking of peace. You also see several, attempts at peace are also being made. They want to reach a truce, right? Initially, we saw that you know, when a truce was being held, then the gods intervene and they restart the battle. But constant attempts at peace are also made. So peace is equally important, right? In the epic, Homer is not really, uh, you know, glorifying war as the best of things. Peace is also something that is, very natural for humans to seek. So both values of war, in terms of the heroism, the glory, the necessity of war, all of that is also talked about. It is not that Homer decries the war per se, but peace is also held as an important value system. So the peace is of course desirable, right? War may be necessary, but peace is desirable. And that is what, you see, that destruction of people, destruction of cities, the endless nightmare of the war in terms of, the mass slaughter is also nightmarish, is also not really appreciated. Okay. So honor, glory, and bravery are the ideals, right? So we already talked about this in terms of the war. Then, what are the ideals that are upheld? It is honor, it is glory, and bravery. These are the ideals that are upheld. These are the things that are talked about in terms of describing how, how glorious or how heroic a character is. Now, war and peace are the two sides of life, and this double theme is spelled out as the story unfolds, right? So we see that war and peace, as we talked about, negativity and positivity, or goodness or badness, all of that. Similarly, war and peace are also a part of life, or are two sides of life, and this is the double theme that the story, the poem highlights. The sense of the pity of war dominates the epic. Homer's sympathy is with the suffering people of both sides. Right, so this is what we see, right, from which we gather a sense of that Homer wanted peace, that humanity is something that is more important. He places his sympathies with both sides, with dying soldiers of both sides, be it the Greek soldiers, be it the Trojan soldiers. So the humanity comes out in passages such as the wavering feeling of Hector's fear and courage, the scene between Hector and his family, and in the statement of Zeus that there is nothing alive more agonized than man. So in the Iliad, honor is the greatest good. In search of honor, heroes lay down their lives on glory. Many a time, the reluctant fighter is lashed back into action, being reminded of shame as the worst evil. To get the epithet of a coward is the biggest shame for a soldier, and that is the story of Iliad, noble, heroic, truthful, displaying epic qualities of unity of action and the ornamental simile, right? So we see that, the pity of war dominates the epic. Humanity, in terms of Hector's, tenderness for his son, his shifting courage, also in terms of, what is the final encounter between Achilles and Priam. There are many, many instances of humanizing, personalizing the story. And we see that, the statement that I think we already discussed this statement in the last class, that there is nothing more alive, more agonized than man. It is about the fact that, man faces agony again because of, the life and death situation that he faces, uh, in comparison with, you know the gods who do not face a situation like that. So honor is the most, is the best of things, right? And soldiers, even when they are, reluctant to go to war, for example, when Paris is reluctant to go to war, when Agamemnon is reluctant to go to war, when Hector is reluctant to go to war, or when Achilles is reluctant, or many other characters, you will constantly see that they're reluctant to go to war. They go to war for the sake of their honor. Because if they run from battle, if they flee from battle, it brings a lot of shame. And that is something that is unacceptable for the warrior, for the soldier. So talking about the Shield of Achilles now. In one of the cities represented by Hephaestus on the Shield of Achilles, a bridal procession is shown, with women standing at the door and admiring it. Other pictures of plowing, harvesting, and vintage are implanted on the shield. Homer obviously delighted in such peaceful activities. At the same time, his agony at the unavoidable misery caused by war is evident. Right? So we were talking about shield. What is this shield about? It is the Achilles' shield that is now built by Hephaestus, who is the god of fire, on the request of Achilles' mother Thetis. Right? So you see that uh, we were talking about the shield, saying that, in terms of the how the shield is built, what is portrayed on it, it is not only portraying, the cosmic universe in terms of moon, the stars, the sun, right, but also in terms of what happens on the life of earth. So, and we saw that a city at peace and a city at war are both being depicted. And here, in the city of peace, you see that a bridal procession is being shown. So you see that Homer is also placing tremendous value on, the simpler things in life. For example, a bridal procession, or plowing, harvesting, right? So these are things that are also important. The normal, the simple, the peaceful life that is depicted by Homer on the shield. These things are also shown as of much value. But again, so to say that peace is of course desirable, but again, that agony, that war, that misery is also unavoidable, right? So war is something necessary, war is something undesirable, but war is something that is completely unavoidable. So the misery that war brings, the kind of death, destruction, mass slaughter that the war brings, is of course again something that is highlighted by Homer. Now, summing up, these are some of the points that you can probably refer to, note. So, Kleos, which is victory and rewards, which is honor. So, Kleos, which is victory and rewards, the glory, both material and social, are priorities. Ultimate aim is Kleos, which is eternal fame after death. Right. So, we've been talking about a lot of war prizes and booty and stuff like that. So we said that for Homer, both material, for that time in the Homeric period, right, we see that for warriors, both things are important. If you think about Achilles' case or Achilles' Agamemnon conflict, that is also about material rewards in terms of who should have more, right? As Agamemnon is the commander in chief, he wants the better and the best, and the more quantities of the rewards also that are earned through war. But then, so you see that, material possessions also matter. But when Agamemnon makes an offer to Achilles in terms of returning, a great amount of wealth, in terms of giving his daughter in marriage along with a great dowry to Achilles, right? All of that, he refuses. Why does he refuse then, right? Not, it is not only a question of, Achilles's anger, but also the question that his pride is hurt, right? His glory, his sense of pride in himself, his honor, his hurt. So, you know, why am I making this point? That both of these things are important. It is not that they can give up on the material things, material objects, material possessions are also very important, as we saw, at many instances that material possessions are offered in exchange of things. They are not only important to gods, but they're also important to the mortals, right? They will not deny material rewards. They will not deny their, the material possession. So, along with that material possession, along with the money and wealth, the social sort of position, the social reward is also important, which comes in terms of acquiring that reputation, acquiring that honor, and the ultimate aim, what they are fighting for, what all these soldiers are fighting for, what constitutes a hero, as far as the Homeric age is concerned, is the idea of Kleos, gaining that eternal, forever fame after death, right? So it is not only about acquiring honor during the battle, acquiring glory during the battle, but to be doing something so heroic that it brings eternal fame. So that is the ultimate aim why people are fighting the battle. And if we probably look at that, we'll understand why a lot of people sort of fight the battle knowing what is their ultimate destiny. Even when you think about Achilles, who kind of refuses, sorry, Cetus, who kind of tells Achilles at the beginning of the book that if he participates in the war, he he has two lives to choose from, right? Either is his life wherein he does not participate in war, he does not go for that, and he lives a long, prosperous life, right? With all his familial happiness. On the other hand, if he chooses to go to war, he will earn Kleos, right? He will attain this eternal fame after death, which is how we understand that how important it is for him, because he chooses eternal fame, he chooses Kleos, he chooses going to war over this, over a long life with a family and materialistic happiness, right? So this kind of an importance is given to Kleos. This kind of an importance we see for glory, for a warrior, right? So he's able to do that. Achilles is able to acquire that kind of a reputation, that kind of an eternal fame after his death. And this is the ultimate aim in life, right? So to think about it, then the ultimate aim is Kleos, in terms of the fact that this is what they're living for, right? Everything else is kind of secondary. Everything else is good, not good, right? They can do with it. But Kleos is something which is the ultimate objective of life, which is why it is given so much of an importance. Now, heroes are complex, intricately woven characters, right? So we've said that all of Homer's characterization is not really simple in terms of black and white characters, in terms of, simple characters and people having only good qualities or bad qualities like that. So they're a mixture of both, right? And they're complex characters, right? So you cannot just sum up a character as only only heroic or only noble or only villainous and completely completely evil in that sense. all of those characters that we find in the book, be it the gods, be it the mortals, right? All of them are complex characters, right? Even if you're thinking about individual gods and individual characters, for example, let us think about the character of Zeus, right? So Zeus has his own failings, right? You see that, at moments in time he is, um, again, he is lustful, and he is tempted by Hera, right? Um, and in terms of Sarpedon's death, also he is, kind of carried away. So he gets carried away, but he's also pragmatic. He's also compassionate towards people. He also disallows gods from participating. He allows them to participate, right? So there are multiple things that he'll be doing in terms of, it is not just that I'm not able to decide, right? It is not about that. It is about a complex sort of characterization, much like us humans also, that, you know, at times you would feel that something is more important than the other. And we have our own flaws, we have our own, imperfections. And that is what is portrayed. So thinking about, gods also as characters, but also the other characters in terms of Achilles or Hector or Agamemnon or Menolos, all of those are also intricately woven characters. We've spoken at length about how the character of Hector is constructed in terms of what constitutes his heroism, his will to fight, his iron will to fight, but also his tenderness, also his gentlemanliness, and also his flaws, that he's afraid at times in the battle. He's tender towards his baby. He's also very very protective towards his army, very responsible towards his people, right? So all those things are also there about Hector, right? About Achilles, again we said that Achilles is again, um, he has his good sides in terms of not only strength and the valor that he displays, but also that he also feels for his companions. He feels deeply for Patroclus. He also feels for his, Myrmidon army. He feels for his father Peleus, right? So all of that is also uh, woven into the character of Achilles. He's not only this angry man who's, just lashing out weapons on other people, right? So, or or just being, just going back to his place, not caring about his soldiers and all of that, which is of course a part of him. But then we also see that it is not that he will always do that, or he will always be angry, and he'll never repent, and he'll never consider anything else, right? So there are moments of grief, there are moments of anger. They may be exaggerated, right? They may be sort of over the top moments like that. But then at the end, you see also that Achilles is also very, very humanistic, right? In terms of how he feels for people he deeply cares about, right? In that sense, for Patroclus, he does not even care about his own death, right? He knows that if he goes to battle, he'll get killed, but he does so for avenging the death of his friend Patroclus. And even if you think about, this ghost of Patroclus appearing in Achilles' dream, how stricken with grief is he to be imagining that, and that kind of close comradeship that both of these people, camaraderie that both of these people share, Achilles and Patroclus, that both of them wanted to be buried side by side. So you see that human relationships are also given a lot of importance in the book, right? It is not only about war, it is not only about um, the sense of victory in the war. It is also about how at times also you see that when Diomedes gets to know that he has a friend, and you know that they share a long ancestry in terms of being a family friend, they kind of exchange armors, they seal their bond of friendship. So we also said that friendship is as important as victory or honor in a war is. So when people realize that they're friends, they do not, kind of hurt each other. So fighting is not glorified for its own sake. Um, as we said, war or fight is not glorified for its own sake, right? It is not just, it is not just the display of masculine strength or display of, strength, valor, that you see in fighting, right? It is not glorified for its own sake. It is glorified for the interest, for the reason that the fight is done for. Then importance of familial and human life is shown pitted against the ravages of war, right? So we also spoke about this. So you can think of it in terms of, what happens to the families of the warriors, how they react to it, about the Hector, Hecuba connection, about the Hector Andromache connection, about Hector and Astyanax, right? About how Agamemnon feels about how about his brother Menolos, about how that they should get their honor, right? They should have their people besides them. How it is wrong for the Trojans to wrongfully abduct Helen, right? So familial human life is also important, right? And it is also pitted against the ravages of war, meaning that against the kind of mass destruction, against the mass slaughter that we see happening in the war, the familial life, the human life suffers, right? And that suffering is also shown to us in greater terms. So more to life than revenge. There is more to life than revenge, and more to manhood than slaughter. Right? So you would, of course, understand this when you understand that Achilles' final revenge that he takes, it is not, it is not really something that is glorified to that extent, right? So his revenge, right? Nobody is blaming him for taking that revenge, for avenging the death of his friend, but there is human, there is proper honor, there is proper rites and rituals for burial that he should have done, which is what everybody disapproves of, right? So Achilles' treatment of Hector's body is actually an instance where we see that there is more to life than revenge. That Patroclus has been avenged, but in terms of giving a proper burial to Patroclus, to Hector, and to maintain his dignity, to maintain the proper code of conduct during a war, that is not something that Achilles had done, right? So there is codes, there is ritual, there is dignity, there is humanity that is more important than just a revenge. Then more to manhood than slaughter, right? So this is again something that we can understand by the example of Achilles, that just killing, or the kind of indiscriminate killing that he is doing for the Trojans is not really displaying his valor, his manhood, his sort of strength. It is something that is kind of looked at disapprovingly by other characters, right? That he is being completely crazy, being completely mad, killing people like anything, right? Rather than it being glorified as something, highly courageous or highly manly, right? It is actually given as something that is uh, kind of an overreaction or kind of stupid to do. Now we've already talked about how this epic is a tragedy, talking about the falling fate of the hero. Now the fate was another point about fate, right? So fate was a literary device for Homer, not religious dogma. So he used both fate and value of action wherever he needed, and we cannot really distinguish between what is fate and what is action. So the Greeks, right, the period that we're talking about, at that point of time, fate was a literary device for Homer, right? It is not something that is overpowering and that would carry the narrative at all instances for all times, right? Fate, Homer uses the idea of fate whenever he needs to, right? It is not a religious dogma, it is not a religious orthodoxy in terms of, that everything has to happen by fate. There can be nothing else. So human action is also used wherever it is needed, and so is the doctrine of fate, right? So this fate thing functions like a literary device, right? For example, that he's fated to die, or Achilles is fated to die, or Hector is fated to die, or Greece is supposed to win, right? So all of that Homer uses in his narrative to build that suspense, right? Or to create that irony or to create that dramatic tension. But it is not something that is totally given for this society. And based on that, since Homer uses it like a literary device, and of course, historically also, it is not something that is a given for the Greek society at this point of time. Therefore, we cannot identify the characteristic properties of fate as would be understood during the Greek, understood during, the Greek period that Iliad is talking about, or we cannot really distinguish between when is Homer wanting to talk about, the importance or significance of fate, and when is he really, talking about the value of action. Again, we said that economic background to the novel is agricultural, right? So the references to plowing, harvesting, and cattle, and shepherds, etc., also shows us that the economy or the economic background during this period is agricultural. The society is agricultural. Then the meter in the in the poem, of course, the edition that you're reading, guys, is in prose. But remember, the poem, it is written in a poem format. It is an epic poem, and the meter that we see used in Iliad is complex. It falls under the oral tradition of poetry, and then repetitions, as I had talked about earlier, repetitions allow the poets to kind of remember, because it is in the oral tradition, nothing is written down really. Therefore, this ring composition, what is ring composition, right? It is another characteristic feature of the oral poetic tradition, wherein words are repeated, or episodes are repeated, so that the poet brings back to is brought back to where he started, right? So a lot of the Iliad, if you actually look at the entire book, many things are kind of repeated. Almost half of the book is actually repeated, right? So why does that happen? So as to ease and aid memory. So it follows a ring composition. Things go back, turn around, and it follows a circle, something that we were talking about in a previous slide. Now, Homer only reports as third-person narrator, does not evaluate, comment, etc. But it is not objective. I've already talked about that. But just to put it down in their words again, that of course Homer says that he's only reporting what events have happened, but then we have to also remember that he's the one selecting what event he wants to talk about. He's the one selecting, how is he going to talk about those specific events. So of course the narration is a third person narration, right, where he's reporting things, but we cannot say that it is entirely objective. Now, speeches are important as they carry the psychological weight of the poem. Now, a lot of the times we see that speeches are made, right? Especially by the orators like, you know, Nestor or um, Polydamas or Odysseus, right? There are multiple instances of speeches being made, or Agamemnon also, right? So they carry the psychological weight of the poem. What does that mean? That they show us an insight into the mind of the characters, right? Or what are their beliefs? What are their values? What are they thinking? What are their thoughts, right? So they carry that sort of psychological relevance in terms of talking about how the character is constructed, what is going on in their mind, and what relevance does it hold for the other characters as well. So he shows characters not through direct description but also through other people's reactions towards them, right? So another characteristic which goes along with Homer reporting things as a third person narrator, not really judging and evaluating, is that he does not talk about, he does not give character descriptions as such, but he talks about them in reference to other people's reactions towards those characters, right? So I hope all of this is clear to you now, and I'll be quickly looking at your questions now and seeing what questions you might have before we end this class. Thetis is married to Peleus. She is not married to Zeus. Okay, right. I think that is it. There are no other significant questions there. Of course, guys, please read the book. Right. My suggestion would be that please read the epic. It is the primary text. You should be reading it. Of course, for your references, your ultimate help book is your SOL material. So please go through your SOL material as well, and that should suffice. You can look at some question papers if you want, right? But in the SOL material, again, you would find some university questions, and that would be sufficient for dealing with the paper. Please go through the entire book, right? Get the prescribed edition if you can, and look at the introduction, look at the entire character list and everything that we've spoken about. Also probably look at the PPT so that it gives you a brief version of whatever we've discussed in class. And along with that, reading the book, if you go through all of this, it will be more than sufficient for you, right? No other need for going to other. I wouldn't say that Zeus is responsible for the deaths of Hector, only to promise, only to fulfill his promise to Thetis, right? Because there are multiple factors involved. Again, it is difficult to simplify or reduce things as such. Of course, Zeus plays an important part. He decides at one point of time when the gods are intervening that this is the final thing. We are not going to proceed further. Nobody is intervening now. This is going to go as per plan, right? But of course, Zeus is also influenced by what is the fate of Achilles, what is the fate of Hector, right? So there are both things at play here, right? And also is the action of Achilles and Hector, right? Hector is being advised by his parents to probably stay back. He also feels that he should stay back into the walls of Troy, but he does not do so, right? So his action also matters. Achilles' action it also matters, that he chooses to go back to war to avenge the death of his friend, right? When he knows that it would actually mean death for him. So action, fate, Zeus, both the characters, and the promises to Hera and Athena, the promises to Thetis, everything together is responsible for what happens, right? We cannot just pick out a single reason and say that this is it. If you have any other, sort of questions, please mention class quickly so that we can take them up. Benefits of the god, why they let the war happen. Okay, somebody is saying what is the men. Okay, though first of all, I'll just answer a quick query. I've answered this multiple times, but the edition that you're referring to is one of Penguin Classics edition, translated by EV Review, and you should refer to that particular edition. I've already sent a pic to the group, and you can refer to that so as to see, or you can also refer to your syllabus in which your edition is clearly mentioned. Now, I think one of the questions here is, what is the benefits of the god? As we've explained, the entire Greek world depended on, how they related with the gods. So it is not that gods would stop the war. You, in fact, see that gods have initiated the war, right? So please make sure that, how we understand gods today and how the Greeks understood gods and their role during that time is completely different, right? So please stick to that sort of a timeline. Please stick to what the story is saying. Please do not, think that gods are these, and Homer's gods are not just noble characters, right? In terms of, aiding the human beings, in terms of, stopping destruction, stopping war. Even if you were looking at Mahabharata, right, and if you think of Lord Krishna as a god, does he stop the war? He does not, right? So you understand that the politics of the wars are something very, very different, right? And even when we build up figures and characters like the gods, we do not really understand them to be completely either devoid of the human predicament, nor they can be, completely devoid of their roles to play in that war. So in Greek mythology and in the book Iliad, we are going to stick to the Iliad. So you see that the gods have a relevance in terms of that they initiate, they participate in the war, and one of the basic simple reasons that would probably validate this argument is that they have their own kids fighting these wars. Why would they not interfere, right? So that is something that is happening here. I'll send the picture again, and I think I'll be taking this up as the last question. That Achilles is the protagonist who killed Hector to avenge his friend Patroclus. Then who is the antagonist, right? So protagonist class we have to understand as the main character, not like this noble hero, right? That we understand in terms of our sort of Bollywood references, right? Who is the savior of all? That is not something that is happening in this book. Of course, he avenges the death of Patroclus, but that does not really make him an undeniable, invincible, or noble hero, so to say, right? He does that to avenge the death of his friend, right? That is his own motives, and you see also that he does that for his own self interest, right? For the death of his friend. It is not something in the interest of the larger people, or in the interest of the even in the interest of the Greek army, so to say. He's only concerned with his personal vendetta, and therefore you cannot, he's the main character who's talked about, but there is no antagonist, so to say, in terms of, uh, but two of the main characters, Achilles is of course pitted against Hector. So if you have to think about an opposite character, or an antagonist to that, sort of in terms of the war, in terms of the conflict, then you can say probably Achilles is pitted against Hector. But in terms of being this antagonist, if you think of an antagonist then as a villainous character, then Hector would not qualify that category, because of course, as we said, that good and evil, every character is endowed with that, right? So nobody is entirely good, nobody is entirely bad. Yeah. So I had only one link for one group probably. If you're facing a problem with that, then you can please contact the admin. Their number would be there, right, on the group, and then you can probably ask them to add you to other groups. right, your so I think this is, the end of Iliad. Thank you, class, and I hope you've your doubts, and we've done some, these discussions would prove to be helpful for you to understand the epic, and then also answer questions based on it. Right, so thank you, class. I'll meet you again on the 29th of January, and we'll be doing the Bible, right, the book of Job, and then the Saint Gospel, the Gospel of Saint Matthew. And then after we complete those, we'll be moving on to the background sort of readings that we have in Unit 5 in terms of Plato and Aristotle. Right, so we'll be seeing each other again, and I think this is for the Iliad, and I'll just terminate the class now. Thank you. Please take care.